So I'd like to invite up to the podium Dr. Jeyarajah, Dr. Freischlag, Dr. Wood, and Dr. Edwards for our panel discussion continuing on a similar theme, talking about the well-being of our leaders.
Thank you all so much for having me today. It's really a true honor to be in this amazing room with this amazing group of people. And to those of you online, thank you for joining us. Just while our esteemed panel is sitting down, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and also a shout out to those of you out there in non-typical practices. So I'm actually originally from Sri Lanka, grew up in Africa, went to school in England, and came to America for undergraduate medical school. Was lucky enough to be trained by Dr. Michalasi at the University of Chicago. Shout out at University of Chicago. And did 1 year of a transplant fellowship after some research, so I call myself a recovering transplanter. I was in traditional academic medicine for 8 years at UT Southwestern, and then thought I fell from grace and moved into the private world. And I think that's important for you all to know because so many of our FACS members are in non-typical academic practices. So we've tried to recreate the best of academics outside of traditional academics, and I come with that perspective today. So thank you for having me. Thank you, Dr. Turner and Dr. Sutherland, for recognizing those of us in sort of not the typical practice. Let me introduce our amazing group today. So today we're going to be learning about leadership principles and hearing great examples of how our colleagues have crafted their leadership styles and used it to inform surgical education practice. We've heard earlier from Dr. Kafarani about the real emotional distresses that surgeons can feel and over an adverse outcome, and the regular burnout and moral injury that we can experience from a variety of professional and personal reasons. So we talk about well-being, and it's a universal concern at all career stages, especially when you're a leader, and that's really the focus for this discussion, because I think sometimes we don't really think about our leaders and what they're going through, because there are so many specific things that they have to deal with. We have a distinguished panel today that represent all of these different areas of medicine. We have Dr. Melanie Edwards. Dr. Edwards is a general thoracic surgeon in an integrated health associates at St. Joseph's Mercy in Ann Arbor, and she's in a unique practice. She's a board-certified thoracic surgeon. She received a medical degree from Loma Linda and then completed a general surgery residency at Beth Israel with my dear friend Mark Callery and that group. She then went on to a CT fellowship at St. Louis, and then loving training so much, she took an additional year in MIS thoracic surgery at Cedars-Sinai. She has an interest in minimally invasive thoracic surgery, lung cancer, esophageal surgery, and is the second vice president of the Southern Thoracic Surgical Association, and is the vice chair in the Missions and Membership Subcommittee. I couldn't read everything you do because it's just incredible. Dr. Julie Freischlag, you all know, and she is now the Dean of Wake Forest School of Medicine and Chief Academic Officer of Atrium Health after a recent merger. And she has so many people under her. It's just incredible. She, of course, is the president of the American College of Surgeons and serves on the board of directors of the AAMC, as well as many international functions. Dr. Doug Wood is the Henry N. Hawkins Professor and Chair at the Department of Surgery at the University of Washington. We have a preponderance of CT surgeons on this group, and he was the chief of the Division of CT Surgery, undergraduate at Harvard, and serves on the Board of Regents. He's also been involved in the Regents Committee on DEI issues, very dear to my heart, and is on the board of directors for the STS. I can't read all of the amazing things you've done, Dr. Wood, but it's such a pleasure to have you all here today. So today's discussion is going to be sort of a fireside chat, And our overall theme is the well-being of leaders. So let me start out, Dr. Wood, as a leader, how do you engage in well-being on a daily basis?
Well, I'm going to refer to Dr. Michelasi's point that 70% of us think that we have a good work-life balance, and I reflect about my goals to exercise, which is one of the things that I do for personal well-being, and recognize that I actually fail more often than I succeed, meaning more days go by that I say tomorrow, because the day is long, and so that's an aspect of wellness that's personal for me, and one that I'd say that, to be honest, I fail more frequently than I succeed.
Thank you for that. Dr. Edwards, how about you? And I do want to mention you're in a hybrid environment, so the challenges of being a leader in that environment are different. So outline specifically how that works.
Well, yeah, I'm technically in private practice. I, don't hold academic appointments or percent effort, so everything I do is clinically oriented, but I do a lot more that is not, that there is not carved out time for. So then the balance is making that time. And so the two big challenges I find are 1, time management, 2, prioritization, and then 3, kind of figuring out where those priorities are and how I'm going to make it all happen. So I recently finished up Atomic Habits. It took me 3 months to read it, only for the reason of exactly what Dr. Wood mentioned, is how do I make these things that I know are going to keep me effective and functioning well integrated on a routine and regular basis. And one of the really cool tips that I'm trying this last 30 days or so is 2 things. Number 1, find your minimum baseline. If it's 1 minute, he tells a story of somebody who went to the gym for 5 minutes every day. You may think 5 minutes doesn't mean anything, but if you make it a daily habit, then on your worst days, everybody can carve out 5 minutes, right? And the second one was never miss a day. So if you miss 2 days, or if you only miss 1 day, but don't miss 2, so then you don't create a cycle, and if you miss a day, no big deal, but then if you miss 2. So, there are a myriad of hacks out there, but I think ultimately it's really understanding the importance. We are our own best resource, and time is our other non-fungible resource, and then looking at how to do that.
Fantastic. And Dr. Freischlag, I'm coming to you last but not least, and just a little sort of story. When I first met Dr. Freischlag, I was site visiting the Hopkins program, and she was knitting a blanket for one of her residents. So it was such a great way to mentor just how we don't all need to fit in a box. And my greatest pride, Dr. Freischlag, is my 28-year-old son still wants me to make his birthday cakes. And I missed 2 birthdays, and he still talks about them. So tell us about how you incorporate wellness into your daily life.
Yeah, actually, my husband does the birthday cake baking. I delegated him all the cooking, which was very smart of me. Exercise, actually, as you get older, I think is more important. I actually have an elliptical down below and start off the day with 32 minutes. I went from 30 to 32 with the pandemic, thought I could push that through, and actually have found that to be helpful. And I do it probably, I miss a couple, but I really find I feel better that day. I do wake up and give 5 minutes of meditations. Charmilla taught me to do that, who's the chair at Texas Tech. And when you're older, you wake up at 5:30, so just wait as you young people go, and you can wake up and think about the things that are beneficial. And I think the third thing I would tell you is to find these little mini pleasures. So yesterday, I showed up here, and I must admit, it's been a long couple of weeks, so I didn't realize I didn't have much to do yesterday. So I actually decided to take a walk and go see all the monuments, because I hadn't seen them. I don't think I even had walked up to see Lincoln ever, because when I was a little kid, I think I said I wouldn't do those steps. And so I got 21,000 steps in yesterday, and I saw Jefferson, and I saw Martin Luther King, and the Korean monument they're redoing and putting the names up there, and the Vietnam, and remembering where we came from, especially with the crisis in Ukraine. So finding those little things you can do almost on a daily basis that give you a little bit of joy that nobody knows you just did that, to do it, and that you actually get pleasure without having to, climb a mountain or take 3 weeks off to be happy. I think that actually has come to light a lot during the COVID-19 crisis.
No, thank you so much for that. And I was just at the HBA in New York City, and I love to shop, Patricia, And so, so one of the things I did was, I snuck out, and, one of my second favorite designers, Etro, my wife is my first, and Dr. Freischlag, how do I get over the guilt that I felt about stepping out of that meeting? Because I was like, oh my God, I hope nobody sees me because, but I'm wearing a pink jacket, so yes, somebody's going to see me. So,
Well, as I was sitting there, I actually reserved a ticket to go to the Chicago Museum of Art on Thursday when we're at the American Surgical, but don't tell anybody, okay? Because that's my sneaky and it's Thursday afternoon. I think I'm good to go, so you won't see me there. And actually, my best example was once I landed in San Francisco, and there's a St. John's store on Market Street, and there's a guy that helps me buy suits since we went to the American College there to do suit buying. Some of us went there. So Kais will pull out everything and put it on 70% off. So I flew in a Uber, landed. He had 7 suits for me to see. I tried them on, bought 3, got back in the car, ended up in Oakland at a meeting for UC deans, and no one knew where I'd been. So I'm an expert at this, to do it. And again, I sat there and just smiled, not knowing that Jack Stobo had no idea where I had been or what I had done. And I do think women have done this more because you had to do so much incognito. So what men can do to help us is tell your stories, because I have one I just bought tickets to the Museum of Art. So I think we were used to, women, trying to do family life balance. That's why we make it 70%, is that we were used to doing it, and maybe your assistant knew or something. But I think talking more about those things that you do, and I'm a shopper too, so we'll have to go together.
I know, I love it anytime. And that was important for me to tell you that story about, baking a cake, because throughout residency, I did take the time to make those cakes for my kids, and it was really important, and I didn't realize how important it was till my 28-year-old said, I'm assuming you're making my cake this year, right, Dad? And, I remember the 2 years, one because I couldn't walk because I pulled my back out, and the second because I couldn't bake it in his kitchen in his little apartment in Atlanta. And so that was important, and I thank you for sharing that. Dr. Edwards, I want to ask you, I want to get back to your comment about being in private practice, because being in the same field, you know what it was like in COVID, right? Collections minus overhead to keep your office running. It was treacherous, right? Because there's no buffer there. How do you find the time and the energy to take on these leadership roles? Because they take away from some of the things you just have to do to keep the lights on. So can you share that with the group?
Yeah, so it's been a transition. I've been in private practice for almost 4 years. It'll be 4 years in June. And I made an Excel spreadsheet with everything that I was doing outside of my work, and there were 20 things on that list. And then I color-coded them as to the things that were near and dear to my heart, the things that I cared about but maybe somebody else could do, and the things that I did because I said yes to everything. And so then I put a timeline, and so all the things in red, I either like resigned from immediately, thank you for the opportunity, it's been amazing, and so now I have a cadre of things that I do care about, so it's not a burden to take the time for them because they're important to me, and they're things that also, these things do bring us joy, they are sources of enjoyment in their own way, and so that's been one. I'm fortunate that I'm employed, and so we have a little bit of a buffer there, so I was fortunate not to have to have that worry. But it was real because I didn't know. None of us knew what was going to come out of it, and so there were real stressors there that you just had to think about and manage.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. It was interesting because I was, throughout my career, I've been on several panels, and one of the things was a piece of advice to somebody in high-end academics where they said, choose what you say yes to. But for those of us in the private world, I say yes to everything because they don't come along that often.
Yeah.
And so it's a very different kind of mindset that we have to go into things. Dr. Wood, kind of a question about how you as a leader put yourself in the shoes of somebody that may have a different experience than you. So can you just outline to us, especially in the DEI space, how you take on sort of, trying to take on or understand the different perspectives that come to your office on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's a really good question and deals with the wellness of others, and which I think is the majority of what leaders do, is concentrate on the wellness of others. And the experience of others is certainly part of that. And I've found myself to be increasingly aware of how much I don't know. It's taken me a while to develop that awareness, but I think the key for me is to remind myself of humility, of not recognizing the walk that other people have gone through and their lived experiences, and trying to pause, slow down. Slowing down helps me. And when my instincts are judgment, to challenge my instincts and to really think about the view of the person that's coming to me. And I feel that has helped me have more empathy, more compassion, and to be more connected to a diverse group of individuals in the department that range from staff to trainees to faculty that fortunately have incredibly different experiences than I do. I mean, I am also excited by the fact that they have different experiences than I do. And so part of it is slowing down in humility, and part of it is celebrating the fact that it brings richness to our environment and to what we do. And that, I guess, helps me pay attention to it better as well.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. Dr. Edwards, it's interesting because as a Black woman, one would think that we would understand. But even within our spaces, just an example is colorism. How do you put yourself into the mindset and the experience of those that may not have had, a Harvard education?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm an immigrant, and I am a first-generation North American, newly minted American as of Tuesday. Yay. And thank you all. Went down to the Capitol to celebrate yesterday.
Yes.
But, it's a really important question because there's not a monolith in that space, and the lived experiences are so different. And even for me, as someone who you would look at and think that, oh, yes, I certainly understand, having come to this country with educated parents, I had no idea, And so, to Dr. Wood's point, you have to stop, look, listen, and open yourself up to the idea that you don't know what somebody's experience is, and that there's tremendous value and benefit and richness that we all gain. And so someone's struggle and someone not walking the way I thought surgeons walked, having trained back in the day, well, relatively speaking, is not necessarily the way it always has to be, and that there's value in a different perspective. And it's okay for residents to take time out to go to the dentist. That's actually a good thing. We couldn't do that when I was training, and appreciate and celebrate it as opposed to, think it always has to be the same.
Thank you so much for that personal perspective, because I think sometimes it is it is a burden to bear, isn't it? And it's my daughter's a human rights major, and she's always says, Dad, it's not always your burden to bear. There are people that actually can do this. Shout out to the ACS for having a diversity officer now. Thank you for that, which is wonderful. Dr. Freischlag, how about you? You know, you've just gone through this huge merger, and how do you understand, especially the different practice types that you're dealing with?
Well, we will call it a strategic partnership because they didn't buy us. You know, I spent the last 2 years explaining to people that we're not leaving Winston-Salem like the banks and many other organizations that were once. Piedmont Airlines used to be in Winston-Salem, and many places have left, Haynes, that. So it's a strategic partnership, but I am part of 42 hospitals, 800 clinics, and I have two brand new bosses this year. I have a new president of the university, Susan Wente, who came from Vanderbilt, first woman president of Wake Forest, and then Gene Woods, who is the CEO of Atrium Health, and he's African-American and not a physician. And both of them are younger than me, and that pisses me off, but that's the way it is, okay? And with my role, I report to both of them. As the CAO and Dean, I report to the university, and then as we're building a new school in Charlotte, a regional campus, I do both. And I think part of it is just what Dr. Wood said, is you got to stop and listen, because most people come to work to do the right thing. Now, there are a few that come who work to cause endless trouble and go home. There's a few of those, and those are those ones you have to get rid of that we just talked about, the sabotage people. But most people are trying to do the right thing, so having appreciative inquiry. And we actually spent a lot of time the last year and a half with the Racial Equity Task Force at my place, because, we have some history in Winston-Salem that's not pretty, right, to do it. And I'm in North Carolina, and we listened, and I learned so much of things I didn't know, that I was on a panel and actually answered a question that was directed to the two women of color on the panel, but I felt I could answer it according to what I had learned. And they were both so thankful that, similar to when a man answers my question, when they ask about what's it like to be a woman surgeon, one even put it on the news in Minnesota, and one works for the Hawks down in Atlanta, that it was sort of nice that I didn't have to answer that question, that somebody else could take that one ball from me for once. And I actually understood, because I didn't speak about race much. I really spoke about women's issues. So I've learned a lot about private practice physicians, those that are employed, those that want to be faculty members, all sorts of conflict of interest. But there's a spot for everyone. There's not enough of us to get things done. And there's so many patients that can't access us. And the COVID-19 has really showed us where we have our spots. And I do talk about what has COVID-19 done for me lately. It's not a long list, but it does have some things that have changed our practice, and we can't go back. We really need to go forward in a way that helps our patients. We heard that about the pediatric patients today, and each other. So I do think that listening, learning, and being able to speak up, and then if I say something that isn't quite within realm, that she feels comfortable saying, Julia, you were close, but you need to think about this. Or I can tell Doug, well, I'm not sure I agree with you. And there's no animosity, it's just curiosity. And it's like, oh, okay, I can think about that and change your mind. Because as a leader, I think one of the most important things is to be able to change your mind. Boy, was I wrong. Picked the wrong person, did this, didn't do that, and then flip it to doing it right.
No, thank you for that. And just, coming back to wellness, so obviously our wellness is in the sphere of our families, right? That's sort of the most important thing to all of us, I believe. So if any of you could comment on how do you sort of maintain your wellness at work, but in the context of that family life too, significant others, kids, that type of thing? Because I sometimes feel like with my kids, we had a bit of an issue with my middle kid, and I asked myself, would this have happened if I was not at work so much? And the thing that really got me through that was my oldest son saying, Dad, you go to work and round and we're not even up. You meet us at church and we never knew you'd left, because that was important to me, because my wellness is based on my family's wellness. So if any of you would take that question and talk about it, I would really love to sort of understand how a leader puts this in the context of a family.
You want to start?
Dr. Wood?
Well, and it's a great question, and it's something that it's a common one that I'm talking with colleagues about, particularly younger colleagues. My two daughters are now young adults, and I reflect backwards on the years from when they were infants to now, and I've gone through phases. I went through an angry phase where I was angry at work most of the time because it was preventing me from going home. Yeah. Fortunately, I grew past that stage and recognized that it was never going to be perfect. And it was a day, in a sense, I felt a daily struggle, one that I was always making choices that were never quite perfect, but tried to balance the commitment to my family and the commitment to a big job. And I made sure that I made it to every soccer game and every student-teacher conference, and that I was home for dinner. But there was also lots of times that I was gone, and that I felt guilty about. I have a daughter home right now from Mexico, and I'm feeling guilty that I'm here. So I'm leaving early. I'm not staying for tomorrow because I'm going to see her tomorrow. And that's a choice that I'm making to compromise between, this important work that we do at the college and my family. So, and I feel like I'm still making those choices. They're not easy, but I make them in both directions and to the best of my ability. And I think that's what we all do when we have demanding jobs, but we have loving families, and we want to be there for them, and it's important that we're there for them.
Yeah. Dr. Edwards, Dr. Freischlag, I just think this is it's at the core of everything to do with wellness, isn't it? Because we can't be well unless we feel like we're well in every aspect of our lives to some degree. I always tell our trainees, you're one person, because sometimes people will tell me, well, I kind of did this at work, but at home I'm an angel. And I always say, that nurse that called you at midnight and the reaction you had, your 17-year-old will elicit that exact reaction one day. So if you yell at that nurse, you don't want to be that father or mother. So Dr. Edwards, please.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've been thinking about this more as I get older. I'm actually single. I have fur babies. And so it's a different struggle because then, there's nothing that keeps me I can stay in the hospital, I can keep rounding, I can go back and check one more time, and circle those dots and finish. And so I have to be very intentional about carving out the time because there's nothing pulling me. I have to push myself and make those connections and meet, kind of keep my extended family and friends close. And so it is different, but I think it's it's not going to be perfect. And so, if you let go of that and let go of the guilt for not always being there at the birthdays and Christmas celebrations and whatnot, but showing up when you can and giving the time and sometimes you do make a trade-off, and it'll depend on the circumstances and priorities.
Thank you for that. I think we've replaced every child with a dog as they've left home. And so we've saved probably tens of thousands of dollars in psychologist fees because these dogs are like the greatest thing. Dr. Freischlag.
Well, Cynthia Churchill once said, hope shouldn't be your plan, so you shouldn't hope that you're going to make it home. I once had two young women surgeons plan this big thoracoabdominal esophagus case on Halloween, and I looked at both of them, Ann Lador and Danielle Molina, you both know them. I said, so what is the plan? Why don't you do it on, you're never going to get home to trick or treat. That hope is not a strategy. Do it on the 30th, because you'll never get there, and making sure that you partner with that way. So you always want to organize. And you need to listen too. I have 2 stepkids, is one of the reasons I can do a merger and a strategy. Is I'm a step grandmother, which they kind of listen to me. And then I have a son who was in vitro. And so he was here last night. That's why I wasn't at the reception. He came here and met me for dinner with his wife because they live in Potomac. And when he was little, I came home late and he said, I'm not getting enough care. Okay, so he's about 6. He was 6. And I'm like, okay. What do you mean by that? Well, every other mother has bought snacks to school, and you have not. And I said, okay, I can give you all that care. What kind of snacks? We can have them there tomorrow. So you always need to ask that extra question. You also can use your busyness to benefit you, And so when he was in grade school, there were a lot of things I didn't want to do with those mothers. I mean, oh my God. And so, especially I was in LA with entertainment lawyer mothers. Oh my God. And so I would write a check, and the only thing I did is I went to the library once a week and read a book to his class at 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay? But I would choose that. So you can use it to your advantage on both sides, where you don't need to do everything. Society's not that nice for those of us that are trying to balance it. And the last thing I'll tell you is he's fantastic. Don't have any guilt. His daughters are amazing when I see them on his Twitter account. They're going to be fine. They're going to be resilient and amazing people as long as you're there, when there are some times of trouble or stress to do that. And I do think COVID has been tough on our kids, so you need to pay attention not only to our resident kids and our medical student kids. You all know I've had sort of a little issue at my institution this last week, and part of it is the COVID thing. People don't know how to react. They don't know what to do, and so I do think that we have to watch. The younger generation has been impacted much more than us with the lack of socialization, the having to give up stuff. That my kid got married, a little wedding last week, and now last year in a big wedding this year. They've been getting married for 2 years. They're so sick of getting married, So I do think you need to pay attention. But I do think that it's that balance every day, taking those little things. Go see those dogs to make that happen. We just had to put our dog down. My husband's just devastated, so he's been shopping and FaceTiming with dogs. Is that normal? Yeah, okay. So we need another dog.
Yeah.
Rohan, I'm going to ask, there's one issue I want to make sure we cover, and that is our own wellness. And you ask it at the beginning, but we just talked about what we do about it. I mean, part of the reason I think this panel came about is I expressed to my co-leaders my own vulnerability in this time where I think as surgeons, we all consider ourselves resilient and that we can tough it through. And we're recognizing that we need to pay more attention to wellness, but then leaders of surgeons, there's actually no space for them. And actually, I looked this up. I tried to see what is there in the literature about wellness for leaders. And when I looked that up, it's all about what leaders can do to produce wellness for their teams, not what happens to the leaders. And COVID, I would say, for me, is I recognize that it's been an enormous trauma over time. That for a while it was putting out fires, dealing with fears and transition and changes for faculty and reorganizations of staff and trainees. But over time, realizing that putting out all those fires and being the cheerleader for everyone else, that it was sapping myself. And it took me quite a while to realize that. And I think it's important since this is a leadership group, that we recognize that and look for strategies. And I'll just share, for me, it is peer support. We talked about peer support earlier, but it's peer support of other leaders, other chairs in our school, other department chairs of surgery that are friends and that I can share with and connect with and be vulnerable with. I think this is maybe the unspoken trauma or burnout that leaders aren't supposed to acknowledge, because we're supposed to be the tough ones when things are when we're struggling, like in COVID. But I want to acknowledge it because I think it's an important thing for us to pay attention to. It's been an important thing for me to acknowledge to myself, and even, feeling some aspects of trauma from the faculty during certain times of the past 2 years. Not intentional, but deep and hard to recover from, with sleepless nights that I know that we've all had. So I want to make sure that we at least acknowledge that, and I'd be interested in either of your thoughts on how it's affected you.
Yes, if we could hear from you, Dr. Edwards. Thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Wood, and I'm sorry I didn't mean to, go over that, but that is so the whole purpose of this.
So, Dr. Wood, you bring up a very important idea and aspect, and I think there are two things, and it's one of the things on the slides from the previous talk where the concept of resilience, surgeons were actually self-rated around 28%, which I saw that and I thought, well, that to me flew in the face of everything that we think of ourselves as surgeons, as leaders, because we pride ourselves on our resilience and our ability to keep going when the going gets tough. But there is not a space. There's a really great article in the Harvard Business Review from about 2001 called The Making of the Corporate Athlete. And it goes over the kind of struggle of the CEO, because it's lonely at the top. Nobody's going to stop and ask you how you're doing. And so the idea of taking time for that recovery, and it's going to be everything. It's going to be the physical, emotional, spiritual aspects, but it has to be there because we are human beings, but everything, every system, every body needs a way to rest and recover. That's what sleep is. It's our body's way of restoring the physiologic and emotional and mental stress that we go through on a daily basis. That's why chronic sleeplessness causes so many health problems in our society. So I would encourage everybody to read it if they haven't, because it's a very nice framework to kind of build a backbone. But number one, I think it's permission, so creating the space for that to be okay. And I think as leaders, we have the opportunity to do that because we can model it, and then we can give examples for our trainees and people, but we can ourselves do it. So it's able, so permission, space to do it, framework, and prioritize it, and develop a practice, whatever that is.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. And last comment, Dr. Freischlag, before we open up for questions.
Yeah, and I actually brought this up. He mentioned it at our last virtual Board of Regents meeting for a woman who spent all her life not working at home, the minute walking in the door not working. This has been just the antithesis of what I wanted to do. I don't even have an office at home, man, because why would you? But now my son loves working at home. I have found I've had a little anxiety even getting on a damn plane yesterday. We were short one stewardess again, and I got canceled going to New Orleans, and you worry about the person sitting next to you and all of that. So there's a little anxiety getting back to what you used to do. I'm a people person, you all know that, so not seeing you all has been devastating, and it's so great to see people now. And I think that actually being able to speak that out aloud and saying you're not okay. I know my husband is retired and has been there with me, but many of you live alone and you don't have that person that's always there and saying, I'm just not okay today. And I'm usually pretty upbeat, but being a little crabbier looking at things. And then they say the next few months are going to be the worst out of the pandemic because we're coming out and we're acting weird. There was a mass shooting in Sacramento this morning. There was a shooting in Baltimore. People are saying unusual things. You know, we've had a lot of conversations of what should be in our communities and how we talk to each other. I think we need to think a little bit harder of how to be respectful to one another, because we're all struggling to get to the other side. We had this big project, this big strategic partnership, so we had something to do, but we did it all virtually. And now I'm trying to meet these people that now are my new partners in that, and it's intriguing to know them better online and virtually than I did in person. And some of them I just now am meeting for the first time in person. So I think giving yourself some space, like us both walking over to the Capitol and standing in front of Martin Luther King and thinking about where your fortunate pieces are, taking some time like he is to go see his daughter, and me saying, I'm not doing the reception, I'm eating with Taylor. I think those are things that are very helpful to you, or getting a fifth dog, whatever that takes to do it. But I do think that you need to give yourself, and if you call it out in front of your teams, they're going to be so appreciative that they can say something too, so you can find the person that's in trouble. Because I tell you, somebody in your team right now is in big trouble, and as surgeons, we don't let you know. So make sure you go ask people. I start off every meeting now, how are you? What's going on with your team? How are you feeling? What are you doing this weekend? And then we'll talk about the financial mess we're all in, because that's the other thing to do it. But I think spending that time would be well suited. And this has done wonders for me being here today. And so I think taking that joy out of the things you used to do that make you go back to who you used to be.
Thank you so much for that final comment. Let's open the floor for questions, if that would be okay, Dr. Sutherland? Just a few. Okay. And is there anything online, Kath? Yes. Okay. Yes, sir.
John Armstrong, Tampa, Florida. Rohan, Julie, Melanie, Doug, thank you for an enlightening panel. How do you model healthy behaviors for your teams?
Let me ask Dr. Wood to take that. Just in the interest of time, I want to make sure we get through some of the questions.
Well, I think that it's doing it yourself. So I think it's how you show up, but it's also what you emphasize as a priority. So I think that it is about when someone's sick, or they have a sick child, or they have an event, actually celebrating that and emphasizing that is really important, and it takes priority over the case that was going to happen that day, or the extra work that they were going to do, or getting a partner to take call instead. It is, I found that it's the opposite of what I did in training, which was that you sucked it up and you did everything. It is actually about giving grace to the people, all the members of the team, and helping each other out and modeling that we're willing to step in for each other, so that we share each other's life's challenges, but also celebrations.
Thank you. Dr. Dent in the back.
Yeah, it strikes me for many people that get involved in leadership situations, I think of our private practice colleagues here in the room, to be involved in these sorts of things that bring us a lot of wellness, costs us tens of thousands of dollars per year in reduced productivity or reduced salary. And even in academia, my bonuses are less, and I go over my travel budget and pay for travel to some of these trips out of my own pocket at times. And so financial planning from day one for the young people in the room seems to be really important, so you don't end up like many of my private practice colleagues that are just on the hamster wheel and can't afford to do some of the things we've been talking about here today. And I'd welcome thoughts and perspectives on that. Am I the only one thinking that, or is there a lot of reality to that?
I speaking from the private standpoint, I think that's absolutely right. Dr. Edwards, take that question.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And, I'm one of those who got a late start and learned some of this early, but I do follow a lot of the physician blogs, and there's this whole movement of financial independence as a counter, as a anecdote, or one way to prevent or manage burnout, meaning you're not working because you have to, because there's no way you're going to survive. You're doing it because because you find joy and enjoyment in what you do. And there are easy steps, and for those who get started young, it's not too much of a sacrifice, but it's critically important, and I think one of the things we don't teach enough.
Maybe I could comment real quick. If you're in the first half of your life collecting stuff and buying stuff, and the last half of your life trying to give it away and nobody wants it. So don't become an RVU addict. Just don't do it, So you don't need all that. You need experiences and time.
Question in the front.
Hi there. I'm Allison Porter. I'm the chief of surgery at a 120-bed hospital in a non-academic setting an hour north of Seattle. My question is, as chief of surgery, I'm here looking for more concrete examples of what can I be doing for the other surgeons. And I know, Dr. Freischlag, you mentioned that you will ask, how are you doing? What are the other things that we can be doing to help the well-being of the surgeons that we're looking after?
And so let me ask Dr. Freischlag about that, but also, I think, importantly, we want to make sure you're okay. Because really, it's a lot for you.
Absolutely.
And I know what that feels like in a small place. Right. There's no turning around, right? It stops at you. So please remember that too.
Thanks.
That's good. Well, I actually have a couple small hospitals in my system that are not academic. So I have one up in Wilkes, which is a 52-bed hospital. They've lost 500 patients to COVID over the 2 years. And I have a 42-bed hospital down in Lexington that actually we just built them brand new ORs when COVID hit. And so you know what those finances look like. And my orthopedic hospital also struggles, which is a 40-bed hospital. So I have a little semblance of that, even though I'm a 900-bed hospital. Figuring out ways to round about and find people. I actually still operate a bit, so when I'm in the OR, seeing how people are, maybe taking some snacks like I took to my son. You can take them to floors and being there to talk to people. I do a monthly video that's a minute long that I send out and ask people how they're doing, and we celebrate something fun that happened in the community so people can see that and they really enjoy that, whether it's for Doctor's Day or one of the residents got something or we got a gift or something like that. I think finding those little things that you can touch them as humans, and then they may actually touch you back as a human too, instead of coming in and usually when you're chief, they only complain, right? There's not many people that come in my office saying, God, Julie, it's great to see you. You're doing a great job. Those are not so often. But I think coming up with those little things, you just sort of a sprinkle of that. Or I had to move my parking spot because we're doing a new tower, and I have to walk through about, 10 minutes of walking through the hospital. And instead of being on my phone, trying to do my emails and stuff, I have started looking people in the face and saying hi. And the number of employees that have stopped to thank me for hanging in there, that have thanked me for still having a job, saying just hello has been amazing. So taking that phone and actually looking people in the eye can be helpful too.
We need to wrap up, so I apologize, but I just wanted to leave you with my own personal wellness tip, which is the advice I give everyone when they get married. Wake up every morning feeling like you are the luckiest person in the world. And that's always good advice for a good marriage, because then you're not looking for the next best thing. So I just feel so fortunate to be here. I can't imagine that I would ever be standing in this position with this group of amazing people. That helps me with my wellness, because it just puts it in perspective about, gosh, how is this possible? So thank you so much.
What a great panel to lead into to lunch.